So today we'll focus in on detecting and preventing transaction laundering, which is a practice that enables people engaged in all kinds of risky to illegal activity to covertly gain access to the financial system.
Of course, the payment ecosystem is designed to detect and prevent illegal or otherwise prohibited activity. That goes without saying, but we're saying it anyway. Illicit actors that are barred from accessing payment processing capabilities can attempt to circumvent these compliance controls through transaction laundering. In many ways, this is analogous to more traditional forms of money laundering, where you'd have a front company posing as a genuine business that isn't actually selling anything, and the payments that it's taking are actually for something else. So I think everyone has experienced a situation where you're walking down the street and you pass a storefront that just never seems to be open or has no customers and maybe just sells kind of weird stuff that nobody wants. It's possible that you might just be walking by effectively a front for illicit activity that is not actually meant to cater to the public.
From the perspective of a payment processor, all of this raises the question of how do you manage this risk? How do you uncover these transaction laundering accounts that are lurking in your payment portfolio? There are a few different angles to this, but the very first one we'll discuss is the website. So this is a great point to start with because providing a website is usually a key component if you are attempting to obtain an e-commerce merchant account. Analyzing the website can provide really significant clues and risk indicators regarding whether or not the business is what it says it is. So the most important principle is understanding what a genuine online business would do, which is anything and everything that it can do to attract and retain customers. If you have set up a transaction laundering website, your website's goal is to provide cover to you, not to attract customers or run a business. So certain types of transaction laundering fronts may be more likely to be associated with certain types of violative activity. The main reason for this is to keep the transaction process running smoothly and looking genuine, not only to the payment provider, but also to the consumer. Because if the consumer is buying some sort of illicit product and then sees an unusual or silly charge come through on their bank statement, they are much more likely to call their bank and ask questions or initiate a chargeback. And for the merchant, chargebacks are going to bring extremely unwanted attention. So it's important from the perspective of these illicit actors to obtain sort of a transaction model and a merchant descriptor. That would be the descriptor that appears on your card statement that are plausibly related to the underlying business in some way without giving away what it really is. And across all these categories, there's a common focus in mapping out networks of bad actors. There are certainly people operating in isolation, but more commonly, we see larger scale concentrated efforts that can be mapped and tracked to anticipate the next move before it occurs. To share some final thoughts, illicit e-commerce merchants are always going to be motivated to do whatever it takes to obtain quick and easy processing. It is more efficient for them to do this, and it is cheaper to obtain credit card processing through transaction laundering than it is to find a payment processor who will openly tolerate the activity that they are doing. Following the money and stopping the money are both important in preventing transaction laundering. What we've focused on here today is really the actors themselves, not their customers. But if you're in the position of having access to transaction data, there's a whole other angle to this, which is knowing your customer's customer. Who are the people who are making transactions on their website, on these websites? Once we've identified that a website's engaged in transaction laundering, we suddenly will become very interested in the people who are making purchases on these websites. Those are going to be people that we want to follow too, in order to really understand the ecosystem of who is trying to get into this system and where they're showing up. Finally, as transaction laundering detection improves, it's going to become less efficient for people to set this up themselves. So we expect that the marketplace for transaction laundering websites and accounts will likely grow to meet this demand. And tracking these groups is, I think, key to the future of transaction laundering prevention and detection.